My evil boss fired me after I built his entire company, so I used my admin access to delete everything and watched his business crumble. You've destroyed everything. I hope you're proud of yourself. I'm Alex Martinez, 28 male. My boss just fired me after 3 years of loyal service, so I deleted his entire business from existence. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about justice. 3 years ago, I was fresh out of college with a computer science degree and desperate for my first real job. Richard Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Digital Marketing Agency, hired me as an IT systems administrator. At first, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The company was small, but growing, and Richard promised me opportunities to grow with it. What I didn't realize was that Richard Sterling was a master manipulator who built his success on the backs of talented people like me, then crushed them. When it suited his purposes, the first red flag came just 2 months into my employment. I had spent weeks developing a custom client tracking system that automated most of our project management tasks. It was revolutionary for a company our size. It saved hours of work daily and impressed our clients with its efficiency. The day after I finished it, Richard called an all-hands meeting. I'm proud to announce, Richard said, standing at the front of our small conference room with his chest puffed out, that I've personally developed a groundbreaking client management system that will revolutionize how we do business. He clicked through slides showing screenshots of my system, explaining features I had designed and coded myself. This innovation will set us apart from our competitors and increase our efficiency by 300%. I sat there, stunned. My colleague Sarah Chen, a graphic designer who had become my closest friend at the company, glanced at me with wide eyes. She knew I'd been working on this system because I'd asked her to design some of the interface elements. But when I raised my hand to speak, Richard shot me a warning look that made my blood freeze. Alex, he said with a fake smile, as our IT administrator, you'll be responsible for maintaining this system I've created. I trust you can handle that level of responsibility. After the meeting, I approached Richard privately. Richard, that was my system. I developed every line of code, every feature. Why didn't you mention that? Richard's expression turned cold. Alex, you're an employee. Everything you create here belongs to the company, which means it belongs to me. If you have a problem with that, there are plenty of other IT jobs in this city. The second major incident happened 6 months later. Our biggest client, Morrison Industries, was struggling with their website's loading speed. I spent my own time after hours analyzing their code and discovered the issue was with their hosting configuration. I developed a solution and presented it to Richard, along with a proposal to offer web optimization as a premium service to our other clients. Richard loved the idea. 2 weeks later, Morrison Industries was thrilled with the results, and we started offering Sterling's premium web optimization as a new service line. The first month alone brought in an additional $40,000 in revenue. At our quarterly meeting, Richard announced the success of his new service innovation. Thanks to my technical expertise and business acumen, he told the team, we've identified a new revenue stream that's already exceeding projections. Sarah raised her hand. Didn't Alex develop this solution? Richard's jaw tightened. Alex implemented my vision, yes. But the strategic thinking and problem-solving came from management-level decisions. I wanted to scream, wanted to stand up and tell everyone the truth, but I needed this job. Had student loans, rent, and dreams of building something meaningful. So I swallowed my pride and stayed silent. The third incident was the one that really broke something inside me. It happened just 8 months ago, during our company's 3rd anniversary celebration. Richard had rented out a small banquet hall and invited all 15 employees, plus their partners. During his speech, he talked about the company's growth and success. When I started Sterling Digital Marketing, he said, raising his glass, I had a vision of a company that would revolutionize how businesses approach their online presence. Through my innovations in client management, web optimization, and strategic digital solutions, we've grown by 400% in 3 years. Every single innovation he mentioned was something I had created. The client management system, the web optimization service, the automated reporting tools, the customer relationship database, All of it was my work. My late nights, my creative problem solving, yet he stood there taking credit for everything. While I sat at a table in the back, watching my girlfriend Emma's confused expression as she realized what was happening. After the party, Emma and I drove home in silence. Finally, she spoke. "Alex, honey, I don't understand. Didn't you tell me you created most of those systems he was talking about?" "I did create them," I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you correct him?" I couldn't answer her because I didn't have a good answer. Fear, maybe. Desperation to keep my job. The hope that eventually Richard would recognize my contributions and reward me fairly. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that Richard Sterling wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was stealing my professional identity. Every innovation I created became his legacy. Every problem I solved became his genius. Every late night I spent perfecting code became his dedication to excellence. That was the night I started documenting everything. Every email, every project, every line of code I wrote. I didn't know why I was doing it at the time. Something told me I would need proof someday. I had no idea how right I was. The months that followed the anniversary party were a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Richard seemed to sense that I was growing frustrated. So he alternated between small rewards and crushing disappointments, always keeping me just hopeful enough to stay, but never satisfied enough to feel secure. In November, he gave me a small raise, 5%, which barely covered the cost of living increase. "Alex," he said, calling me into his office, "I want you to know how much I value your contributions to this team. You're a real asset to Sterling Digital." For a moment, I felt validated. Maybe he was finally recognizing my worth. That's why. He continued, "I'm giving you additional responsibilities. From now on, you'll also be handling our social media management and basic graphic design work. Sarah's getting overwhelmed, and I think your technical background will bring a fresh perspective to our online presence." My heart sank. Additional responsibilities meant additional work, but the same title and barely any additional pay. I hesitated. Richard's expression shifted. "Of course, if you feel you're not up for the challenge, I understand. Not everyone has the vision to see the bigger picture." No, I said quickly. "I can handle it." "Great. I knew I could count on you." The social media work was actually interesting at first. I created automated posting schedules, developed analytics tracking systems, and designed graphics that increased our engagement by 200%. But within a month, Richard was taking credit for our social media transformation in client meetings, describing it as his strategic digital evolution. Meanwhile, Sarah was struggling with her own battles. Richard had started criticizing her design work more frequently, always in front of other team members. "Sarah, this color scheme is too bold," he'd say during project reviews. "Our clients expect sophistication, not art school experiments." Sarah would spend hours revising designs, only to have Richard change his mind and request something completely different. She started staying later and later, trying to anticipate his preferences, but nothing seemed to satisfy him. One evening in January, Sarah and I were the last ones in the office. She was crying quietly at her desk, surrounded by printouts of rejected designs. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I asked, rolling my chair over to hers. "He hated everything," she whispered. 6 different concepts for the Henderson project, and he said, "They all looked amateur and uninspired." "Alex, I've been doing graphic design for 8 years. I'm not amateur." I looked at her rejected designs. Were beautiful, creative, professional, exactly what the client had requested. "These are amazing, Sarah." "What exactly did he say he wanted instead?" "He wants me to think more strategically and understand the client's true vision. But when I ask him to be more specific, he just says, I should be able to figure it out if I'm really a professional." This was Richard's pattern. He would give vague, impossible instructions, then blame us when we couldn't read his mind. It was a way of keeping us constantly off balance, always feeling like we weren't quite good enough. "Sarah, he's playing games with you. Your work is excellent. Then why doesn't he see it?" I didn't have an answer for her, but I was starting to understand that Richard's criticism wasn't about the quality of our work. It was about control. by constantly finding fault. He kept us desperate for his approval and afraid to challenge him. In February, things escalated further. Richard announced that we were implementing a new performance accountability system. Every project would be reviewed and scored with rankings posted publicly in the break room. Transparency drives excellence, Richard explained during the announcement meeting. When everyone can see how their colleagues are performing, it creates healthy competition and motivates improvement. What it actually created was a toxic environment where people started hoarding information and undermining each other's projects. The graphic designers started refusing to share resources with each other. The account managers stopped collaborating. On client strategies, the whole office became tense and suspicious. Somehow, despite doing excellent work, Sarah and I consistently received lower scores than Richard's favorites. Employees who happened to be related to him or who had gone to his alma mater, the scoring seemed completely arbitrary. It's based more on Richard's personal relationships than actual performance quality. The breaking point for Sarah came in March. She had spent 3 weeks developing a complete rebranding package for our biggest client, Morrison Industries. It was stunning work, a modern, clean design that perfectly captured their corporate evolution. The client loved it and immediately approved the entire package. At the next team meeting, Richard presented the project as a success story. This rebranding represents the kind of strategic thinking that sets Sterling Digital apart, he said, clicking through Sarah's designs. By really understanding the client's core identity and market position, I was able to develop a visual strategy that exceeds their expectations. Sarah's face went white. She had worked 60-hour weeks on this project, missing her nephew's birthday party and her anniversary dinner with her boyfriend. And Richard was presenting it as his own creative vision. After the meeting, Sarah approached Richard privately. I couldn't hear the conversation from my desk, but I watched her body language become more and more distressed. Finally, she walked back to her desk, gathered her personal items, and left without saying a word to anyone. She never came back. The next day, Richa sent an email to the team announcing that Sarah had decided to pursue other opportunities, and that her remaining projects would be redistributed among the team to ensure continuity of service. I knew the truth. Sarah hadn't quit. She'd been pushed out for daring to question Richard's theft of her work, and now I was completely alone in my understanding of what Richard Sterling really was. A predator who fed on other people's talents and destroyed them when they became inconvenient. But I still had no idea that my own destruction was already being planned. Spring brought new horrors, but also new opportunities. With Sarah gone, Richard piled even more responsibilities onto my plate. I was now handling IT administration, social media management, graphic design, web development, and database management. Essentially, I was doing the technical work of 3 different positions for the salary of one, but I had a plan. For months. I'd been working on something special during my lunch breaks and after hours, a comprehensive business management system that would revolutionize how small companies like ours operated. It combined client relationship management, project tracking, automated billing, staff scheduling, and performance analytics all in one integrated platform. This wasn't just another tool, it was a complete business solution that could be licensed. 2 other companies saw it as my ticket to independence, my proof that I was more than just Richard's technical grunt. I planned to present it to Richard as a partnership opportunity, where I would retain ownership rights and we could build a whole new revenue stream together. I spent 4 months perfecting every detail. The interface was intuitive, the code was clean and efficient, and the functionality was beyond anything available in the market. I even created a comprehensive presentation showing how it could generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in licensing revenue. On a Tuesday morning in early June, I requested a meeting with Richard. I was nervous but excited as I sat in his office, laptop open, ready to show him what I'd created. Richard, I've been working on something that could transform our business, I began, turning my laptop screen toward him. This is a complete business management platform that integrates every aspect of company operations. I walked him through the features, showing how it could automate most of our administrative tasks while providing powerful analytics and client management tools. Richard's eyes lit up as he saw the potential. "This is impressive, Alex," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Really impressive. How long did this take you to develop?" "About 4 months of after-hours work," I said proudly. "I think we could license this to other companies and create a whole new revenue stream. I was hoping we could discuss a partnership arrangement where I retain development rights and we split the licensing revenue." Richard was quiet for a long moment, studying the screen. "Can you email me a copy of this presentation? I'd like to review it more thoroughly before we discuss terms." "Of course," I said, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. "I'll send it over this afternoon." "Actually," Richard said, "why don't you give me a complete demo right now? I want to understand every feature." The next 2 hours I showed Richard every aspect of the system. I explained the code architecture, demonstrated the admin functions, and even gave him the database passwords so he could see how the backend worked. I was so excited about sharing my creation that I didn't notice the calculating look in his eyes. "This is exactly what Sterling Digital needs," Richard said finally. "Email me everything, the presentation, the code, the documentation. I want to review it over the weekend, and we'll talk on Monday about implementation." I left his office feeling like I was finally going to get the recognition and partnership I deserved. Over the weekend, I sent him everything he'd requested, including the complete source code and administrator documentation. Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, eager to discuss the partnership details. But when I walked in, I noticed something strange. There was a young man I'd never seen before sitting at Sarah's old desk, setting up a computer. "Alex," Richard called from his office. "Can you come in here for a moment?" I walked in, expecting to discuss my business platform. Instead, Richard was holding a folder and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, almost gleeful. "Alex, I'm afraid I have some bad news. We're going to have to let you go." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Why? What did I do wrong?" "It's not about doing anything wrong," Richard said, his voice taking on a fake sympathetic tone. "It's about company restructuring. We're moving in a new direction, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated." "But Richard, what about the system I showed you? What about our partnership discussion?" Richard's expression didn't change. "What system?" My blood turned to ice. "You asked me to send you all the files. Alex, I think you're confused. Any systems you developed while employed here belong to Sterling Digital. That's basic employment law. But I developed it on my own time, with my own resources, using knowledge and skills you gained while working for this company," Richard interrupted. "Everything you create as an employee belongs to your employer. Surely you understand that." I stared at him, finally understanding what was happening. Richard hadn't been interested in a partnership. He'd been planning to steal my work and fire me all along. He'd probably already started marketing my system to potential clients. "I want to introduce you to Tommy Sterling," Richard continued, gesturing toward the young man I'd seen at Sarah's desk. "He's my nephew, and he'll be taking over your responsibilities. You have until the end of the day to transfer all passwords and system access to him." Tommy Sterling. Richard's nephew. Probably fresh out of college, willing to work for half my salary while Richard profited from my innovations. "You can't do this," I said, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "Actually, I can. Illinois is an at-will employment state, which means I can terminate any employee at any time for any reason, or no reason at all." Richard opened the folder and pulled out a document. "Here's your final paycheck, minus the 2 weeks' notice you didn't provide." 2 weeks' notice? You just fired me? Well, if you had been more proactive about communicating your career intentions, perhaps we could have worked something out. Richard's smile was cruel now, not even pretending to be sympathetic. I looked at the check. It was for exactly my normal weekly salary, minus taxes. No severance, no compensation for the months of extra work I'd done, no recognition that I'd built most of the systems that kept this company running. "I want copies of all my work files," I said. "I'm afraid that's not possible. All work files belong to Sterling Digital and are confidential company property. Tommy will need you to show him how to access everything, but you won't be taking anything with you." For 3 years, I had poured my creativity, my expertise, and my professional soul into building Sterling Digital's technical infrastructure. I'd worked late nights and weekends, sacrificed my personal time, accepted constant disrespect because I believed that eventually my loyalty would be rewarded. Instead, Richard had been planning to steal my greatest achievement and replace me with cheap family labor all along. The transition needs to be completed today, Richard continued. I trust you'll be professional about this process. Professional. After 3 years of stolen credit, manipulative management, and constant psychological abuse, Richard expected me to professionally hand over everything I'd built to the nephew who was replacing me. As I walked back to my desk, I felt something break inside me. Not just my heart or my pride, something deeper. This was the part of me that had believed in fairness and loyalty, in the idea that hard work and talent would eventually be recognized and rewarded. Tommy Sterling was young, maybe 22, with Richard's same arrogant smile and entitled attitude. He looked up at me as I approached my desk. "Uncle Richard says you're going to show me how everything works," he said. "I'm pretty good with computers, so this shouldn't take too long." I stared at him, this privileged kid who was about to inherit everything I'd built, and made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. "Sure," I said calmly. "Let me show you how everything works." The next few hours were the most surreal of my life. I sat next to Tommy Sterling, Richard's nephew, and calmly walked him through the systems I'd built over 3 years. On the surface, I was being the professional that Richard expected. But underneath, my mind was racing through calculations and possibilities. "So this is the main client database," I explained, clicking through the interface I'd designed. "Tracks all client information, project histories, billing records, and communication logs." Tommy nodded eagerly, taking notes. "This is pretty cool. Did you build this yourself?" "Your uncle built it," I said, tasting the lie like poison. "I just maintained it." "Uncle Richard is so smart," Tommy said admiringly. "Told me he's created all these amazing systems that keep the business running. I'm lucky he's giving me a chance to learn from his innovations." Every word was a knife in my chest. Richard had completely rewritten history, turning my 3 years of work into his genius, and my position into a generous opportunity for his nephew. "Now, let me show you the backup systems," I continued. "This is very important. The company's entire digital infrastructure depends on these backups being maintained properly." I opened the backup management console and showed Tommy how the automated systems worked. "See, every night at 2 a.m. the system automatically backs up all client data, project files, financial records, and system configurations to these 3 different locations." 3 backups? Isn't that overkill? "Your uncle is very thorough about it." "Data security," I said. "These backups are what would save the company if anything ever happened to the main systems." What I didn't tell Tommy was that I had designed this backup system with multiple layers of security and access controls. There were administrative override functions that only I knew about, because I had built them for emergency situations where the primary systems failed. I also didn't mention that every backup system required administrative credentials to maintain, and that those credentials were all tied to my personal access accounts. For the next 2 hours, I continued the training. I showed Tommy the email servers, the website management systems, the customer relationship management platform, the automated billing systems, and the project management tools. All of it was my work. All of it was essential to the company's daily operations, and all of it would become Tommy's responsibility. "Wow," Tommy said as we finished the overview. "There's a lot more to this IT stuff than I thought. How long did it take you to learn all this?" "Years," I said honestly. "But your uncle believes you'll pick it up quickly." Around 3 p.m., Richard appeared at my desk. "How's the training going?" "Very well," I said. "Tommy's a quick learner. We've covered all the major systems." "Excellent. Alex, I'll need you to provide Tommy with all the administrative passwords and access codes before you leave today." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Of course, let me write everything down for him. Pulled out a notepad and began writing. But I wasn't writing the real administrative passwords. I was writing temporary access codes that would work for a few days before automatically expiring. The real administrative credentials were stored in encrypted files that only I could access. "Here you go," I said, handing Tommy the notepad. "These should give you access to everything you need." Tommy looked at the list of passwords and usernames. "Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate you being so helpful with this transition. No problem, I said. I want to make sure Sterling Digital continues to run smoothly. That part was actually true, in a way. I did want Sterling Digital to continue running smoothly right up until the moment I decided it shouldn't. At 5 p.m., Richard appeared again. Alex, I think we're ready to conclude your employment here. Tommy seems to have everything he needs. I stood up and looked around the office one last time. This place had been my professional home for 3 years. I had celebrated successes here, worked through challenges, and built relationships with colleagues. It felt like a crime scene where my career had been murdered. I'll need your building key card and any company equipment, Richard said. I handed over my key card and company laptop. The personal files on my workstation will remain with the company. Everything on company computers is company property. Of course, even my personal bookmarks and family photos were now Sterling Digital property. One last thing, Richard said, pulling out another document. I need you to sign this non-disclosure and non-compete agreement. Read through the document quickly. It prevented me from working for any competing digital marketing company for 2 years. From soliciting Sterling Digital's clients, and from discussing any aspect of the company's operations with anyone. This seems pretty comprehensive, I said. It's a standard procedure. We need to protect our business interests and intellectual property. Intellectual property. Richard was making me sign an agreement to protect the intellectual property I had created for myself? What if I don't sign it? Richard's expression hardened. Then I'll be forced to pursue legal action against you for theft of company property and violation of your employment agreement. I have a very good lawyer, Alex. Legal battles are expensive, especially for unemployed IT workers. I looked at the document again. Richard was covering all his bases, making sure I couldn't expose his theft or compete against him. He wanted to destroy me professionally while profiting from my work. I'll sign it, I said. Richard smiled as I signed the papers. I'm sorry things had to end this way, Alex. You're a talented young man. I'm sure you'll find new opportunities. His false sympathy was the final insult. After 3 years of psychological abuse, theft, and manipulation, he was pretending to care about my future. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, shaking his hand. Working here has been ... educational. Tommy will walk you out, Richard said. We need to make sure all security protocols are followed. As Tommy and I walked toward the exit, he seemed genuinely sad about my departure. I'm sorry you're leaving, Alex. He seemed like a really good guy. Thanks, Tommy. I hope you enjoy working here. I'm excited. Uncle Richard says there are big plans for expanding the business. He's even talking about licensing some new software platform he's developed. My software platform. Within hours of firing me, Richard was already planning to market my creation as his own innovation. That sounds exciting, I managed to say. At the building exit, Tommy shook my hand. Thanks again for all your help today. Hope everything works out for you. Oh, I think everything is going to work out exactly as it should, I said. I walked to my car and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching the building where I'd spent 3 years of my life. Employees were leaving for the day, heading home to their families and their normal lives. They had no idea that their company was built on stolen innovations and sustained by the abuse of talented people. Tomorrow, they would find out what happened. When you cross someone who understands every aspect of your digital infrastructure tomorrow, Richard Sterling would learn that some people don't just disappear quietly when you try to destroy them. Tomorrow, justice would finally come to Sterling. Digital marketing. But tonight, I had work to do. I drove home in a strange state of calm. Emma was working late at her nursing job, so I had the apartment to myself. I made a simple dinner, sat on my couch, and opened my personal laptop, the one Richard had never touched, the one containing backups of all my real work. For 3 years, I had been meticulous about documentation. Every email, every project file, every line of code I'd written was saved and organized on my personal drives. I had timestamps proving when I'd created each system, drafts showing the evolution of my ideas, and even recordings of meetings where Richard had claimed credit for my work. But documentation wasn't going to help me now. Richard had lawyers and money and a signed non-compete agreement, that would prevent me from rebuilding my career anywhere in this industry. What I had was something more powerful, complete administrative access to every system that kept Sterling Digital running. I opened my secure connection software and logged into Sterling Digital's network using my real administrative credentials, not the temporary ones I'd given Tommy. The system welcomed me back like an old friend. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Over the next hour, I conducted a complete audit of the company's digital assets. The results were staggering. The client database contained information for 247 active clients, representing over $2.3 million in annual revenue. The project management system tracked 89 ongoing projects worth approximately $890,000. The financial systems contained 3 years of billing records, tax documents, and profit-loss statements. The email servers held 127,000 business emails dating back to the company's founding. The website and hosting systems managed 31 client websites, plus Sterling Digital's own online presence. The backup systems contained redundant copies of everything, stored across 3 different locations, all of it. Every byte of data that represented Sterling Digital's existence as a business was under my complete control. I also discovered something interesting. Richard had already started marketing my business management platform. There were emails to potential clients describing it as Sterling's proprietary business solution and a revolutionary platform developed by our innovative CEO. He was planning to license it for $50,000 per installation, with projected first-year revenue of over $2 million. My creation was going to make Richard Sterling a millionaire while I struggled to find new work under a restrictive non-compete agreement. That's when I stopped feeling conflicted about what I was about to do. I started with the backups. Using my administrative access, I connected to each backup location and began systematically deleting files. Not just deleting them, overwriting them with random data so they couldn't be recovered. The process would take several hours, but by morning, 3 years of backup data would be permanently erased. Next, I accessed the main databases. Client information, project files, financial records, email archives. I began methodically destroying it all. But I wasn't just randomly deleting files. I was being strategic, starting with the most critical systems and working my way down. The client relationship management system was first. Its database contained every client's contact information, project history, billing records, and communication logs. Without it, Sterling Digital would have no way to contact clients, track project status, or generate invoices. I didn't just delete the data, I corrupted the database structure itself, making recovery impossible even if they had backups. The project management system was next. This contained all active project files, timelines, resource allocations, and deliverables. Deleting this would leave Tommy and Richard with no idea what work was supposed to be completed, when it was due, or what clients had already paid for. The financial systems were particularly satisfying to destroy. 3 years of invoices, payment records, tax documents, and profit-loss statements, all erased. Sterling Digital would have no record of their financial history, no way to track outstanding payments, and no documentation for tax purposes. I saved the email system for last. 127,000 emails representing every business communication in the company's history. Client negotiations, vendor contracts, internal memos, project approvals, all of it would vanish. Even if they could recover some client contact information from other sources, they would have no record of previous communications or agreements, as each system finished processing its destruction. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Not joy exactly, but a feeling that balance was being restored to the universe. Richard Sterling had built his success by stealing other people's work. Now, he could try to rebuild his business without the foundation of stolen innovations. The final step was the most important: my business management platform. Richard thought he owned it because I'd developed it while employed at Sterling Digital, but I had been very careful about one thing: The core code was stored on external servers registered under my personal name, not the company's. The version I'd shown Richard was just a demonstration interface. I logged into my personal servers and activated the permanent deletion protocols. Within minutes, every trace of the platform was wiped from Sterling Digital's systems. The code, the documentation, the database schemas, everything that Richard needed to market my creation was gone. By 3 a.m., I was finished. Sterling Digital Marketing Agency, which had existed as a functioning business at 5 p.m. yesterday, no longer existed in any meaningful way. The company name was still registered, the building lease was still valid, and the employees would still show up tomorrow morning, but everything that made it an actual business was gone. No client data, no project files, no financial records, no email history, no backup systems, no proprietary software. Richard Sterling would arrive at work tomorrow morning to find that his company had been reduced to an empty shell, furniture, computers, and a few employees with no idea what they were supposed to be working on. I closed my laptop and went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed and curious. What would happen when Sterling Digital's employees arrived to find their company had vanished overnight? I imagined Tommy trying to log in too. Systems with his temporary passwords. Richard realizing that 3 years of business data had disappeared, and the growing panic as they understood the scope of the disaster. Around 10 a.m., my phone started ringing. Richard's number. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 10:15, then 10:30, then 10 for 5. By 11 a.m., I had 6 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I decided to listen to them. The first voicemail, left at 10:07 a.m., was relatively calm. Alex, this is Richard. We're having some technical difficulties this morning and need your assistance. Please call me back as soon as possible. The second voicemail, left at 10:33 a.m., was more urgent. Alex, we have a serious situation here. None of our systems are working, and Tommy can't access anything with the passwords you provided. I need you to call me immediately. The third voicemail, left at 10:52 a.m., was pure panic. Alex, I don't know what's happening, but our entire network appears to be down. All client data is gone. All project files are missing, and our backups aren't working. This is an emergency. Call me now. I decided to call him back, not to help, but to hear the desperation in his voice. Alex, Richard answered on the first ring. Thank God. We have a catastrophic system failure here. Everything is gone. Client data, project files, financial records, everything. I need you to come in immediately and fix this. Sorry, Richard, I said calmly, but I don't work for Sterling Digital anymore. Remember, you fired me yesterday. Hey, this isn't the time for games, Alex. This is a disaster. The entire company could be destroyed if we can't recover this data. It does sound serious. Have you tried contacting your IT support provider? You are our IT support provider? You've built all these systems? Actually, according to what you told me yesterday, you built all these systems. I was just maintaining them. Surely the person who created such sophisticated systems would know how to fix them. There was a long pause. I could practically hear Richard's brain working, trying to figure out how to manipulate me into helping him without admitting that he'd stolen my work. Alex, listen. Maybe we were hasty yesterday. Maybe there's a way we can work something out. You could come back as a consultant? Help us through this crisis? ... double quotes. At what rate? What consulting rate? If you want to hire me as an independent contractor to fix your systems, what's your budget? Another pause. We could pay $1.50 an hour? I laughed. Richard, yesterday you told me that everything I created belonged to you. You stole my business platform, fired me without cause, and made me sign a non-compete agreement. Now you want to pay me $50 an hour to fix the systems I built? Systems that, according to you, are your intellectual property? Alex, please, let's not focus on yesterday. Right now, we need to work together to solve this problem. No, Richard, you need to solve this problem. I'm just an unemployed IT worker with a non-compete agreement, remember? I could hear other voices in the background getting louder and more panicked. Tommy was probably trying to explain to confused employees why none of the computers were working. Client calls were probably starting to come in, asking about project status and deliverables. "What do you want?" Richard asked finally. "I want you to admit the truth." "What truth?" "You built your entire company on stolen work. That every system you've claimed credit for was created by me. That you're a fraud who destroys talented people to feed your own ego." "I can't. I won't." "Then good luck rebuilding your company from scratch. I'm sure your nephew Tommy will figure it out eventually." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I ignored it. Over the next few hours, I received 17 more calls from Richard's number, plus calls from Tommy's phone and several Sterling Digital employees. I didn't answer any of them. Around 2 p.m., Emma came home from her nursing shift. "How was your first day of unemployment?" she asked, giving me a hug. "Educational," I said. My phone buzzed with a text message from Richard Alex. "I'm prepared to offer you a $10,000 consulting fee to help with our technical emergency. Please call me." I showed the text to Emma. "What's this about?" "Richard's company is having some computer problems," I said. "He wants me to help fix them, but didn't he fire you yesterday?" "He did, but apparently my replacement isn't working." "Out as well as expected." Emma frowned. "Alex, what did you do?" I looked at her innocent, caring face and realized I couldn't tell her the truth. Not because I was ashamed of what I'd done, but because I didn't want to burden her with the knowledge. What she didn't know couldn't hurt her. "I didn't do anything wrong," I said. "Richard made his choice yesterday. Now he has to live with the consequences." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Richard. $25,000 consulting fee, plus full reinstatement of your position with a 20% raise. "Elise, call me!" I deleted the message without responding. By 4 p.m., the consulting offer had reached $50,000. By 6 p.m., it was $75,000, plus equity in the company. I ignored them all. Final message came at 8 p.m. "Alex, you've destroyed everything. I hope you're proud of yourself. I'm calling the police and my lawyer. You'll pay for this." I smiled and deleted that message too. Richard could call the police if he wanted. He could call his lawyers. But what crime had I committed? I'd used my legitimate administrative access to remove data from company systems. Unethical? Maybe. Illegal? That would be much harder to prove, especially since Richard would have to admit that the systems I'd destroyed were actually my own creations. More importantly, Richard would have to explain to investigators why his company had no backup systems, no disaster recovery protocols, and no IT security measures beyond what one fired employee could bypass. He would have to admit that his entire business was so dependent on a single person's expertise that it could be completely destroyed in one night. That wouldn't look good for a CEO who claimed to be a visionary technology innovator. As I went to bed that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. Tomorrow, I would start looking for a new job, one where my talents would be appreciated and my contributions would be recognized. I would rebuild my career at a company that valued innovation and treated employees with respect. Richard Sterling would spend tomorrow trying to rebuild his company from nothing, explaining to clients why their projects had vanished and wondering if his business would survive the week. Justice had finally been served. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the office of Dataflow Solutions, a rapidly growing tech company downtown, signing an employment contract as their senior systems architect. The salary was 40% higher than what Richard had been paying me. The benefits were excellent, and most importantly, the company culture actually valued innovation and employee contributions. During my interview process, I had been completely honest about what happened at Sterling Digital. Well, mostly honest. I explained that I had developed several innovative systems for my previous employer, that my contributions had been consistently undervalued and uncredited, and that the situation had become professionally untenable. We've actually heard rumors about Sterling Digital's management practices. My new boss, Jennifer Martinez, had told me during our final interview. The tech community in this city is smaller than you might think. Richard Sterling's reputation for appropriating employee innovations is fairly well known. It turned out that Sarah, my former colleague, had found a position at a partner company and had shared her experiences with Sterling Digital's toxic management culture. Word had spread through the industry network, and Richard's company was quietly being blacklisted by talented professionals. "We're excited to have someone with your innovative background," Jennifer continued. "One of the things that impressed us most about your portfolio was the business management platform you developed. We'd love to discuss licensing that technology for our own operations." I smiled. After I'd left Sterling Digital, I had spent a week rebuilding my business management platform from scratch, improving on the original design and adding new features. I'd learned from the experience with Richard and made sure to properly trademark and copyright all my intellectual property before showing it to anyone. "I'd be very interested in that discussion," I said. Dataflow Solutions ended up licensing my platform for their internal operations and became my first client for external licensing deals. Within 6 months, I had agreements with 12 companies, generating more revenue than my entire Sterling Digital salary had been. But the most satisfying part of my new life was the recognition. When I created something innovative, my name went on it. When I solved a complex problem, I got credit for the solution. When clients praised our technical capabilities, Jennifer made sure everyone knew which team member had developed those capabilities. It was the professional respect I'd been seeking for 3 years. Meanwhile, Sterling Digital was struggling to survive. Through my network of industry contacts, I heard regular updates about Richard's declining business. Within the first week after I'd left, Sterling Digital had lost 6 major clients who were frustrated by the company's inability to provide project updates or deliver promised work. The clients had no way to know that their project data had been deleted. They just knew that Sterling Digital couldn't tell them what progress had been made or when their work would be completed. Tommy, Richard's nephew, had tried his best to rebuild the technical systems from scratch, but he lacked the experience and knowledge to recreate 3 years of sophisticated development work. The company was forced to hire expensive consultants to attempt data recovery and system rebuilding, costs that quickly exceeded their available cash flow. By the 2nd month, Sterling Digital had laid off half their staff. By the 3rd month, they had moved to a smaller office. By the 6th month, Richard was personally calling former clients, trying to win back business with promises of improved service and new management. The business management platform I'd created, the one Richard had planned to license for millions of dollars, was gone forever. Even if he hired developers to create something similar, it would take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, assuming he could even remember all the features I'd demonstrated. But the most satisfying news came from Sarah, who had stayed in touch after we'd both left Sterling Digital. She told me that Richard had tried to hire her back, offering to double her previous salary and give her creative control over all design projects. He actually apologized, Sarah told me over coffee. He said he realized he hadn't given me proper credit for my contributions and wanted to make things right. "Did you consider it?" "For about 5 seconds, Sarah laughed. "Then I remembered how he'd stolen your presentation and fired you the next day. A man who would do that to someone who'd worked loyally for 3 years isn't someone who's actually changed, he's just desperate." Sarah had found her own success at a creative agency that valued her artistic vision and credited her work properly. Like me, she was thriving in an environment that recognized talent instead of exploiting it. Now, as I reflect on everything that happened, I want to address something directly to you, the people listening to this story on YouTube. What Richard Sterling did to me and to Sarah, and probably to other employees over the years, was a form of theft that goes beyond just taking credit for someone's work. He stole our professional identities, our sense of accomplishment, and our faith that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded. For 3 years, I accepted his behavior because I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of starting over, afraid of confrontation. I told myself that eventually things would get better, that Richard would recognize my value, that my patience would be rewarded. But bullies like Richard Sterling don't change. They don't suddenly develop respect for the people they've been exploiting. They only understand consequences. I'm not saying that what I did was the only solution, or even the best solution. Deleting someone's entire business infrastructure is extreme. and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone facing a similar situation. There were legal risks, ethical concerns, and potential consequences that could have ruined my life. But sometimes, someone has pushed you past every reasonable limit, when they've stolen your work and your dignity and your future, when they've made it clear that they view you as disposable, sometimes the only choice left is to show them exactly what happens when they dispose of someone who understands their entire operation. Richard Sterling built his success on my innovations, then tried to destroy my career when I was no longer useful to him. He forgot one crucial detail. The person who builds something usually knows how to tear it down. If you're dealing with a toxic boss, a manipulative employer, or someone who's stealing credit for your work, please explore every legal and professional option first. Document everything. Consult with lawyers. Report violations to HR departments. Seek support from professional organizations. But also remember this: you have more power than you think. Your skills, your knowledge, your creativity, these things belong to you, not to the people who exploit them. Don't let anyone convince you that your contributions are worthless or that you should be grateful for abuse. You deserve to work somewhere that values your talents, recognizes your achievements, and treats you with respect. Those places do exist, and those opportunities are waiting for you. Sometimes you just have to be willing to delete everything that's holding you back and start fresh. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind about workplace dynamics, professional ethics, or standing up for yourself in difficult situations. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories about people navigating complex workplace relationships and fighting for the recognition they deserve. We are all human, dealing with challenges and trying to find our path through professional and personal conflicts. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with someone who might need to hear about the importance of valuing yourself and your contributions. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon about people who refuse to let others define their worth.